77% of adults across 28 countries agree that vaccine passports should be required. And it ranges from 92% approval in Malaysia to 58% in Poland. In the U.S., it's 71% of adults support vaccine passports for international travel, which is in line with Germany. So what's the reluctance? Well, the Republican Party does not want vaccine passports because they don't want the virus to get under control. If Joe Biden can get the virus under control, this is why they're out there promoting, I see it on my Twitter feed every day, 2 or 3 people. I'm not even sure they're people. I'm guessing a lot of them are bots. But, 2 or 3 will pop up with some sort of anti-vax nonsense or, you need to be afraid or here, look at this YouTube or whatever. And I just block these people. It's like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to promote it. I don't want to respond to it. But it's out there and it's growing and it's being fed by the Republican Party and people outside the United States who want to see Biden fail, who want to have a Trump-type figure back. Oligarchs in other countries who do not believe in democracy, who see America as a threat to democracy, and that would be countries like Saudi Arabia, Russia, Turkey, and increasingly now we're seeing, in Brazil and in the Philippines and obviously in North Korea, et cetera, that these folks are getting involved in our social media and pushing this idea that, oh, you don't want a vaccine in America, or that's not freedom. Or what's they're going to sew a mask on your face or whatever, right? Tom Tomorrow's cartoon today. And here's why it's so important. This is a story from the Los Angeles Times, from today's Los Angeles Times. The headline is, Scientists Scramble to See Why, in Rare Cases, Even the Vaccinated Can Get COVID-19. And it starts out with the story of a guy named Kerry Alexander Washington, excuse me. His last name was Washington. He was a practicing clinical psychologist. He got vaccinated. He called up his daughter. He said, oh, look at this. I got my first Pfizer shot. A couple of weeks later, he got his second Pfizer shot, called her up, said, this is wonderful. That was on February 4th. A month after his second shot, right? You're supposed to be totally safe. A month. In fact, it was more than a month after his second shot. He's short of breath. He's having a hard time climbing stairs. So he goes to his doctor, and his doctor says, well, your lungs, I don't know what this is. Maybe we should test your heart. He didn't check him for coronavirus because the guy had been fully vaccinated, 2 Pfizer vaccines. Gold standard. Sent him to a cardiologist. The cardiologist runs a whole bunch of tests and says, your heart seems okay. I don't know why you're out of breath. And then a couple of days later, he shows up. This psychologist, Mr. Kerry Alexander Washington, comes back to the hospital, to the ER, and is dying. They stick him in the ER. His blood oxygen levels are crashing. They finally test him for COVID. And oh my God, he's got a full-blown case of COVID. And it was one of these variants that can sneak past the virus. Not always, in fact, very rarely. Your likelihood is, you're more likely to get hit by a car in, crossing a busy intersection, one of the scientists in this article is quoted as saying, than getting COVID after you've been vaccinated. But still, it's possible. It happens to 0.08% of fully vaccinated people, and 1% of them die. As of April 20th, the CDC reported 7,157 infections among the 87 million Americans who are fully vaccinated. It's very few. But of those 7,000 plus people who got COVID after being fully vaccinated, 500 of them were hospitalized, 88 of them died. In other words, if we can't achieve herd immunity, even if we're fully vaccinated, it's possible to get sick. Now, one of the points they made, this one physician that they're quoting in this article in today's Los Angeles Times, he says, With infectious diseases, the more virus you get exposed to in one setting, the more likely you are to be infected. In other words, they assume that what happened to this guy was that he was probably sitting with somebody or doing a psychotherapy session with somebody or whatever who was heavily infected and was shedding virus like crazy. And he just got such an overwhelming dose of virus that his immune system, even with the vaccine, couldn't fight it off. A CDC study published last week found that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines were 94% effective in preventing adults from getting sick. But at a skilled nursing home in Kentucky, 18 residents and 4 staff members, who were all fully vaccinated, became infected. Why? Because there was one employee who thought he shouldn't get a vaccine because, oh my God. And the culprit turned out to be one of these variants. So there was a second study of skilled nursing homes in Chicago. 22 possible breakthrough infections occurred among fully vaccinated persons. 1 person died. So what's the carry-home message from this? I realize on the right they'd be saying, oh, so you're saying the vaccines don't work? No, the vaccines work spectacularly. The problem is, even if you're vaccinated, if you're hanging out, if you're sitting next to someone in a restaurant who's having a conversation and they're blowing virus all over the place, and they are in that 2 days before they get symptomatic where they're just like super contagious, and they don't know it and you don't know it, even if you're vaccinated, you could be in trouble. This is why we need herd immunity in the United States. And until we get there, really, ultimately, none of us are safe until there's herd immunity. And that's what Republicans are betting on. They are doing everything they can. This is why they don't want vaccine passports. This is why they're telling people not to get vaccinated. This is why Donald Trump hid the fact from Americans that he and Melania both got vaccinated while they were still in the White House. It's why more than half of the Republicans in the United States House of Representatives refuse to answer the question, have you been vaccinated? Because they want it to be like this. They want people to be afraid to go out in public. They want the economy not to recover because they don't want Joe Biden to have a success. They don't want the Democrats to have a success. They don't want this country to work because they are convinced that if Joe Biden cannot succeed in getting the coronavirus under control, then Republicans have a chance in the polls again because Americans will say, hey, yeah, Trump didn't do it, Biden didn't do it. To hell with it. I'm not even going to bother voting anymore. Or I'll go for the strongman guy. He promises he'll take care of everything. I'll just go with him. And this is what's going on. And this is something that kills democracies. There's a reason why George Washington required the entire Continental Army to be vaccinated. They had a different word for it back then. I think it was called variolated. But to be vaccinated against the smallpox. There's a reason why, we require our kids to be vaccinated before they go to school. When you have pandemics, when you have epidemics, when you have public health crises, it's not just a public health crisis. It's also a political crisis, an economic crisis, a societal, a cultural crisis. And the Republicans are doing everything they can, and Republican right-wing media, particularly the media owned by these Australian oligarchs, doing everything they can to make sure that America does not reach a point of herd immunity, so that even fully vaccinated people like this Dr. Kerry Alexander in Washington will be at risk.